Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversational Witchcraft with me, Dawn the Kitchen Witch. Make sure that you like and subscribe because the show is getting so much traction and people are digging it, and you should be the first person to know when new episodes are out. I'm just saying. So today is really exciting because we have an old friend of mine visiting, and I don't mean old as an age. I mean, I've known her for a bajillion and a half years. Probably not that much, probably more like a decade and a half. But her name is Fox, and she is a nomadic soul animal shaman that helps people reconnect with their authentic selves through the wisdom of the animal kingdom. She's absolutely fantastic. She's also an incredible artist, which she didn't put in her bio. I'm just going to say it out loud. She's an amazing artist. Fox, welcome. I'm so happy to see your face.
Hello.
Oh
I
my
know it has been forever. It has been forever. I think we determined like what it's been at least a decade since we've seen each other in the same space.
God.
And we've known each other, gosh, 14, 15 years now.
At least. And
Yeah.
it's funny because there is a select handful of people that were kind of like met me at the beginning of Cucina Aurora Kitchen Witchery, like before that was like my real job, and it was my side hustle. And you were there at my very, very first big convention, which was Fairy Con, which is now
Mhm.
defunct, like all these great big shows are. But which was in Baltimore in
Uh-huh.
2009.
2009, and it was my first show too. I remember because I was wearing jeans and a t-shirt at a
The tail,
show.
you had a
Yeah,
foxtail
well,
on.
the tail, the interesting thing about the tail, right, was that was my last, like, at the end of the show, there was a gentleman who was selling foxtails there. And this was before I knew my soul animal was a fox. But he came up to me and he's like, I'd really like to get something from your table. He's like, are you willing to trade? And I said, well, what do you have? And he's like, you can come to my table and look. And I went over there and nothing spoke to me. But when I looked at the foxtails, there was one that I was just like, I need this. I need this, like, I don't even know. And so I got it at the end of that show. I got it and I was like, I held on to it, and like I still have it to this day. Like every few years I retire them and get another one. I'm working my way up, but like that tail like spoke to me, and I wore it for years at these events.
Amazing.
Before this the fox soul animal work kind of came into play. So yeah.
Amazing.
It,
So like
yeah,
your little heart knew then that this was
I
such an
think so.
important thing. There
I
is a
think so.
photograph of us together from like the
Yes.
2010 or 2011 Fairy Con or Mystic Con, whatever they called
It
it,
was,
the
yeah, the
spring
Mythic
one,
Fair.
Mythic
One of those
something.
things. Yeah.
There's a picture of us together in front of the Cucina Aurora booth. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like us, we were both wearing foxtails. So it's our butts. And it's like us looking
Pretty much
over
is.
our shoulders,
Yeah.
like, "Ah,
Yeah.
we're so cheeky and cute because we're both curvy brunettes. And we both had
As
these
it
little
is.
foxtails on. And my partner was in absolute heaven. He was like, look at all the butt. Um, so and that picture pops up on my personal Facebook page like every year because I guess
Oh,
it's gotten a lot of likes and it's like
I
people
mean,
look at these butts. So I
yeah.
mean, it's but it is crazy. And I remember, oh God. Okay, so your art, I say your art, but it's sculpture. And you were at that
Mhm.
time, you were sculpting these and I don't know if you still are, it's these
I do.
unbelievable, like
I do still sculpt. Yeah.
fey creatures that were like part rabbit, part fairy, and you put them in these little terrariums and like jars and breathtakingly
Oh,
beautiful and so,
thank you.
so, so, so magical. And again, like I feel like I was in such a different place in my life then. Um, that like if I could like if I saw you now, I'd be like, I'm just gonna just take everything off of I'm just gonna buy everything. Here's $1,000. I'm just gonna buy everything on your table.
Well,
Um,
I appreciate. I appreciate.
so you are still doing art. You're doing still
Yeah,
doing
I still
sculpture.
do art. Yeah, I still do sculpture. In fact, actually, this during COVID, I was hired to do special effects makeup and design for a smaller film that was filmed down in South Carolina, that just released back sometime a couple months ago on Amazon. It's called Black Balsam. But like me and my friend, who's also a fox animal soul, he and I were hired on to do that, and so I got to put my art into that. Um, which was kind of a different avenue for me. But I got to sculpt this oh gosh, I wish I could like dig her out of a box. I've got her head in the in a box in the back.
It's her
It
head
sounds
in a
awful.
box. Sorry.
Yeah, so it was this character's like dead mother that he had like stuffed. It's obviously like a drama, whatever thing,
I
but like
certainly it
to
doesn't no, it
sculpt
sounds like a
like an
comedy
old
romance. It's a rom-com.
it totally is. It felt like it while filming. But but yeah, no, so I got to put my skills to work to sculpt like this woman, this old woman that like wasn't a real woman. So that was kind of cool to be able to do. Plus the special effects makeup. So my art kind of bleeds into that. I did, gosh, to catch up over the last decade and a
Seriously, I
half.
haven't seen you in person in about a decade. So like
Right.
when
So
we knew each other in on the show circuit, as you will,
yeah,
I'm the kitchen witch and you're the artist and you're doing all these amazing, three-dimensional art pieces.
yeah,
And then here you are as this, soul animal teacher, healer,
yeah.
reader person traveling the world and learning about all of that stuff. So like what in the
To
world?
then hear about like this, yeah.
Yeah,
So
so
I got
cool.
the special effects gig came from my working with the combat trauma training military work that I did for a little while. So I was pulled on to use special effects to help train soldiers to get ready to go into combat simulation or combat actual like experiences. So that was kind of how I got that gig, like it paralleled with that. But I got pulled onto the team for that because of my sculpting ability, so I could actually sculpt wounds and things like that. So my veterinary training came in handy because I knew what to like work with. So that I was doing that for a little
Wow.
while, yeah. And then in all of that, so in the time that you met me, all the way till now. I was also working because that was kind of my side gigs too. Even my art was kind of a side hustle, even though it took up a lot of my at home time. It was still side hustle because I would wait for the events to come around, right?
Right.
But in that time, I started working at a metaphysical store, and I was working with a lot of healers and readers. And of course, when you're in that kind of environment, as you know, you start to learn about things. And so when one of the things that came up was that everybody's intuitive at some point in your life. Like if you can learn how to tap into that, like you can open up a lot for yourself. And so animals have always made sense to me. And so that's where that part came in. And so since about 2011 was when I like started to realize I was doing that. So that's been growing, and has become my main like focus, but I still incorporate the art in like the things that I do on the side. So I'm kind of still wearing a lot of different hats.
Wow.
But
But it
yeah,
all it all incorporates your magical practices. Now, would you say you define yourself as a soul animal shaman? That is
yes,
how you define yourself. And I
yes,
know there are people, don't fucking write me letters about what the word shaman means,
yes,
right? And
yes,
there are people that have very strong opinions. There are cultures that have
absolutely.
very strong opinions, and that's perfectly acceptable. We're
Of
not
course.
talking about any of that. We're talking about you and what this means for you and your own personal practice. It's not
Yes,
about anybody else's practice.
I actually had an aversion to the title shaman myself for a long time, mostly because again, it was so stigmatized, if you will. Like, the word shaman actually comes from Asia.
Yep.
So that's where it originated. And the idea behind a shaman, it's any person who is a part of a tribe or a community that offers a connection from the living realm, the realm of the physical, to the spiritual realm, whatever that is. And then
Mhm.
throughout the years, it's trickled in and out of different languages and different practices and different cultures. So nowadays, in most metaphysical circles, when somebody says shaman, they automatically think South American shamanism, because that seems to be the most popular form of using that word, but it actually originates from Asia, Northern Asia. But yeah, the reason why I finally settled into shaman was because it was the best word to describe what it is that I'm actually doing for people and doing for myself too. But I had an aversion to it a long time. It was only about a year and a half ago where I finally like leaned into it and I
Mhm.
started to understand that, yeah, actually what I am doing is that. But it became difficult because people are just like, oh, well, where's your tribe? Who is your
Mm.
tribe? Where do you come from?
Mhm.
What is your history? Like, who
Mhm.
trained you? These were
Yeah.
things that came up a lot and they still do. And
Sure.
so I graciously hold space to talk to people about why I chose to call myself shaman, why I finally leaned into it through a lot of my own personal metaphysical spiritual work. And for the most part, people have been pretty gracious about it, but I'm not going
Yeah.
to ever tell somebody that they have to be okay with something. You know, if
Mhm.
they're not okay with it, they're not okay with it. But what I believe is that we are all people of earth, and growing up overseas, living in a lot of different cultures, or in a lot of different countries, and coming from a multitude of cultures myself in my own bloodline, I feel like, to be able to be a child of this planet and apply all of my experiences through my spiritual practice, the right people are going to find me because I'm the right person for them too. So,
Agreed. Agreed.
and
And I love this idea of that you're taking this word and you're using it for yourself to describe the job you do,
yeah,
which is facilitate connection between one
absolutely.
realm and the other. You're not taking ownership and saying, I am a leader of a tribe or I am from this
Hmm.
particular background. You're saying, I'm using this as a word that describes my job. And my
Yes,
job is connecting people between one realm
yes,
and the next. And I think that's a very smart and sensitive approach to a word that might be sensitive for other people. And I also think it describes what you're doing perfectly. And I'm really glad that you're feeling comfortable in that and that you can
yeah.
describe that because people need facilitators. And let's be fair, you're not going to say, I'm a soul animal facilitator. That's
Yeah, it
it
doesn't,
doesn't have a ring. It doesn't look good on a
yeah,
business card.
I mean, I tried for the longest time soul animal reader, but I just felt like reader just didn't fit either. So
Yeah.
I was like, yes, that's what I do. I read people's animals, but I didn't feel like reader was encompassing enough
Mhm.
in that. Like I felt like it was very much like, well, this is what it is and that's it. But it's become much more guidance oriented. Like, yes, I connect people to aspects of their soul signature through the animal that represents that, but I'm also helping them or coaching them even through their communication, their relationships, their career, their pathways, their healing, their inner child work, their traumas, their jubilation. Like I'm coaching them through all of that in this modality. And I feel like that coaching energy is very much what shamans do.
Yeah.
Like, and again, broad spectrum shaman,
Yep.
medicine person, healer woman, whatever you want to call it. That's what they do for people is they help them through their gifts in connecting with source spirit, whatever you want to call it. And then they bridge that. It's a bridge work. So,
Yeah.
soul animal bridge doesn't sound
It doesn't
even
sound
like,
good either.
yeah,
No.
I'm like,
And
oh,
and would you say that your practices because I don't even know if you're using the term shaman to describe yourself, right? Would
yes.
you describe yourself also as a witch, as a pagan, as a priestess? Like what is
Yes.
the found right? Exactly.
Yes.
In your practice,
Mhm.
are you like I think most of us are very, very eclectic. Like I say I'm a kitchen
Yes.
witch, but
But
I've
there's
and
more.
there's so much more. And like I've said it before, like I've got Hecate on my altar next to Ganesha because sometimes I need him to unblock roads for me. But I also have like, an archangel and like I get them all, right? And that's the beauty of
Yes.
being a pagan is that I can have them all and I just, can channel into whatever, tap into whatever energy I need. Would you say that your practice as a soul animal shaman is heavily Native American or heavily
Mm.
neo pagan or heavily this or that?
I
Not
would
at
say
all.
it's heavily intuitive based on
Mm,
where I'm at in the moment. Like I love information. I'm sure you're the same. Like the collection of books and the amount of research and the absorption of information that you can get on a rainy afternoon is profound, right? But like for me, I let spirit talk to me. And what I mean by that is I look for that language, that dialogue that I'm having. So, like, for me, animals are obviously a big part of that, but I don't discount gods, like the deities. I don't discount colors, themes. I'm paying attention to the stars. If astrology stuff pops up on my page, I'm paying attention because I believe that everything is a communication with the all, if you will. So like to just label it one thing, it's tough to, as you just said.
Yeah.
But I think it would be more nature based. So if I had to title it, I don't have a
You
word.
d you don't have to. I was li
Yeah,
just really just
yeah.
wondering because you don't see a ton of animal spirit work in
No,
European pagan or European witchcraft.
no.
You don't see it in a lot of spaces, but you do see it in, um, you do see it in Native American culture. You do see it in some,
Yeah,
like you said, South American. At least in my experience, and I am not in any way, shape, or form worldly in other practices but my own. So I was curious about it because so many of us that identify as witches and pagans have such a strong connection. Part of what is so powerful to us is that connection to nature, and we use nature as a
yes,
blanket term, but we don't necessarily carve out, you know, um, animals being separate from
yes.
general nature.
I
And they are.
Yeah, I would say that. Okay, so you and I met at FairyCon, and at that time I was really exploring nature through folklore. I was looking at a lot of cultures who did connect with the unseen realm, right? And I feel like there's a lot of data to collect from stories from around the world in that way, because the Fae in a lot of different cultures have that connection to the earth. They have that connection to the elements in the same way that animals navigate the physical realm with those concepts or those themes, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like it was just par for the course with my background and passion for animals and understanding them from an early age, then going into veterinary technician school, and then kind of segueing through this to blend all of that. So if I were to say, I mean, I'm very nature based in the sense that I'm having a communication with nature in my practice. However, like if certain themes come up through deities, like I said, that'll be a thing that comes into I work with. And you're right, that not a lot of cultures incorporate animals in a very specific way. In fact, not a lot of Native American cultures incorporate animals in the way that we might think. Oftentimes, like I have a friend who's Lakota, and he was explaining to me that the Lakota people actually don't have animal totems. Like it's kind of a misconception that all Native Americans are connecting in that way. The
Mhm.
Lakota people actually have animals that represent the various like tribes, like the different groups, and when
Mm.
they come together it creates a whole, like a whole
Oh,
ecosystem. So I found that
wow.
very interesting. But there are other tribes who do work more with animals, and if you go into like Australia and talk to some of the Aboriginal people, like they're connected to the land because they're in it more. And I
Mm.
feel like cultures that are very integrated with the land and have to be a lot more hyper aware of the things that could harm them or benefit them in those spaces tend to have closer relationships with animals because they kind of can't avoid it, you know? But with
Absolutely.
my gift, what I was finding was a lot of early on at the very beginning when this opened up for me, I struggled because I would read up on spirit animals and I would read up about people who were doing that work. But what was happening was I would read, like, for example, there's some great books out there: Ted Andrews, Animal Spirit,
Mm.
Stephen
Yes.
Farmer's Spirit Animal Guides. Like, those books are phenomenal, right? But when I would read them, it would say things like bear. And I'm like, yeah, but what kind of bear? Or
Right.
it would say elephant. And I'd say, well, what kind of elephant? And then it would say pigeon. And I'd say, what kind of pigeon?
Right.
Like not all eagles are created equal. Like
Right.
not because of their environments change. And that's what I was seeing. I was seeing very specific animals. A person would come up to me and I'd be like, you're a star-nosed mole. Like, and you open up the book and it's like there's nothing in there. Like every
Right.
standard card deck doesn't have anything like that. So I started to really I guess, postulate on what it was that I was doing, and what I was actually picking up on. And that's when I developed my theory that it's a soul animal, not a spirit animal guide. So it's the animal that represents the person. It's an unchanging energy, a mascot, if you will, for that person. And so that's where it started to kind of be the same tree but different branch, in
Mm-hmm.
my practice. And I met a really great shaman, Shaman Omar. I don't know if you've ever come across his stuff, but he travels around the world and holds a lot of healing circles, and his modality is more South American. And when we first met, he kind of dismissed me. Somebody introduced me to him, and they were like, "Oh, she does soul animal work," and he was like, "Yeah, yeah, okay, whatever, right?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." And I don't think he's a bad person. I just
Right.
think that, and he explained himself afterwards. He said, in the work that he does, there's so many people out there who are like, "Oh yeah, no, I do spirit animal stuff," but they were very blanketed statements, like, "Oh, this animal represents this," but there was no depth to it. So he thought that that was kind of where I was coming from. But when I told him he was a Goliath bird-eating spider, he was like, "Wait a second, what? Come back," you know. So, it's and then, like, the thing that actually turned his head was the person who introduced me, her soul animal is a chicken. And when he heard that, he was like, "Wait, what?" So usually people get taken aback because they're thinking, "Oh, I'm going to be a jaguar, I'm going to be a lion, I'm going to be a bear, an eagle, a wolf," right? And while those are
Right.
really cool animals, there's a lot of other animals out there that are also equally cool.
And
you
and
know
and the thing about soul animal or spirit animal is that they are equally important,
Mm,
right? So like, yeah, it's
absolutely.
so cool. I'm a bear. I'm a this. I'm a that. Well, guess what? That bear can't survive without ladybugs
Hmm.
or bumblebees because the
Yep.
bumblebee is pollinating and making honey and doing all these things so that the rest of the
Yep.
ecosystem can thrive. So it might not be the cool thing, but it's the thing that may be keeping someone else alive. And that might be what your soul's calling is. Is that
Yeah.
kind of how soul
Yeah.
animals present?
Yes. So I think of energy like an ecosystem, right? So in the unseen, everything that is making it possible for us to engage, but also the unseen realm is energy, right? Energy is manifested in different ways around us and in the in between as well, right? So it's an ecosystem, and that ecosystem, just like nature, demands balance. Balance is achieved when all the animals are pulling their weight. When there
Mhm.
is an animal who is sick, not pulling their weight, being antagonistic to their own energy, nature has a way of creating a chaotic element that will remove said problem. And so what happens is the foundations of what I do is that I empower people with the understanding of their energetic signature and almost purpose, not purpose like you're here on earth to like make people laugh type purpose, but like kind of like an energetic vibration that you have as you move through. So, for example, cats, all cats, whether the big cats or little cats, all cats represent some form of autonomy, independence, and they teach that differently from cat to cat. So, the way an African lion who prides teaches independence is understanding your role in an autonomous fashion within a synchronized group. Whereas a house cat, like a domestic short hair, they're going to teach it more on an individual level and like in terms of boundaries and interpersonal boundaries within like a family home, right? So
Mhm.
kind of like Bastet versus Sekhmet, right? Like if,
Mhm.
if people listening understand like ancient Egyptian goddess, like those are the two dualities of the same lesson. So I help empower people with that, and then from there, we build outward. So we understand that the very first energetic ecosystem they were a part of is the family that they were born to. And now you know why your family called for you. You know your animal, you know what they struggled with or what they needed to balance out that ecosystem.
Wow. Come on.
But
Come on. You're blowing my mind right now. Okay. Like,
yeah,
okay. Can I just take a second with that?
yeah.
Because, obviously I'm here, I'm listening to you talking just like everybody else is listening to this and going, "Oh, fuck. What am I?" And as you're talking about this going,
Mhm.
"Oh, why was I put in this family? And holy shit, am I the cat?" Like that's where my brain is, right? That's spectacularly
Mhm.
interesting. And on the point of cats, just because I love my kitties, I've recently had that kind of realization in the last, maybe year or so about
Mhm.
how good cats are at exemplifying consent
Yes.
and boundaries. And,
Mhm.
there are people that feel like, oh, cats are snobbish because they don't want you all over them all the time. And not to get on my soapbox, but I'm like, girl, she don't have to love you all the time.
Yeah.
Okay. She
Yeah.
can be like, no, you only get to touch me when I say you get to touch me.
Uh-huh.
And I think that is a very important lesson that we could all learn from the common house cat. Um,
Well, and
just
think
okay,
about
and
it.
then I digress, back to you.
Oh, no, 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 no. But think about that too. So when we think of a crazy cat lady, like describe that woman, right? So she's usually like on the average. You're pointing to yourself. I'm like, you're not that crazy of a
You
cat lady.
don't
You're like,
know.
you're crazy. You're like,
You
you
don't
don't know
you
me.
don't
You
know.
don't know me.
You don't know me. I'm obsessed with my cats. I love them in like almost it's too like unhealthy.
Yeah.
Like I miss them when I leave the house. I come home and I'm like, "Oh, Juju babies, I miss you so." It's but it's different because the cats I had before these cats, Luna was a calico and she was 100% my familiar. And when you're done
Yeah.
talking about this, I want to get your opinion on familiars versus soul animals.
Yes.
But the boys that we have now, listen, they're COVID babies. We adopted them during COVID. And they were actually, as we're having this interview, today is their gotcha day. So
Oh, happy
Jupiter's
gotcha day.
gotcha day. They were this big, the size of my hand, 2 pounds.
Oh,
And we were home with them 24/7 for like 2 years. So we have a very, very unhealthy, codependent relationship with these chonky 20-pound black cats.
I mean,
I'm just that's so chunky. Um, but no, I am a crazy cat lady. And I could easily see myself down that spiral of sitting home with a cup of tea and tons of magazines, just reading magazines, drinking tea with like 14 cats laying on me, and I could be the happiest
I
thing in the
mean,
world.
fair. I think I could do that too. I don't have any pets right now or friends or family, little fur families around me, but I could very easily see that happening for myself because I do love cats as well. But like the whole idea behind Crazy Cat Lady and how cats actually tie into witches, and then I'll kind of go into the familiar part of it, right?
Yes.
You know where the term spinster actually comes from, right?
Yeah, isn't it a woman who was so good at spinning yarn that she didn't need a
A
man
man.
to
Yep.
support her?
Yes, well, to get yarn, yarn usually came from wool, and you would have to have barns, right? And live on the outskirts of town where people couldn't bother you so much because you were a single woman. And so oftentimes they would employ cats to keep the mice at bay in their barns. And so oftentimes women who were out there doing their own thing, making their own medicine, making their own money, they had all these cats everywhere to help them, right? And
Mhm.
that's kind of how they cats went into that witch motif, if you will,
Mhm.
right? Like, and that was where some of that came in. The animal that actually was most associated with witches in the beginning was actually hares. Hares were believed to be witches who could change back and forth. So
Mhm.
and then but when the time came to start like pointing fingers, we're not going to get into the politics of that, but when it came time to point fingers, there were also other animals who were present, like goats and cats and other farm animals that suddenly became synonymous with the evils of witchcraft.
That bitch, she
So
could think for herself and make her own money. You better
exactly.
burn the hell out of her. She gonna run your town.
Exactly. That's exactly
I
kind of where
mean,
that came
it
from.
it it makes so much sense because, witches have been associated with certain kinds of animals, and witchcraft has been associated
Yes.
with certain kind of animals, and that's very, very interesting. I knew about the spinster part. I didn't know
Yeah.
about the barn cats.
That's
That's
kind of where that
spectacular.
that started to mold and mesh in.
Yeah.
So, when we think about the symbolism of animals at one point in Europe, I think that they were doing a lot more with animals back then. But then when politics came through and fear came through like wildfire through Europe, that's where some of the animal symbolism got lost, and certain animals started being seen as evil or
Mhm.
undesirable. And then that's where like the unlucky black cat thing came through, and all of that was a I guess a segue from that fear, right? But when we talk about familiars, so familiars are either spirit animals, animals in the spirit realm who show up to help you during in your spiritual practice, or actual physical animals like your kitty from before, right? Who show up to be there for you. So these are animals that I call spirit animals. They are animals that show up in physical form, in the non-physical form, in the dream form, in guided meditation form. It's the universe being able to help you in some way through this animal who's presenting itself in the various forms. So that's a spirit animal guide or a spirit animal friend or a familiar that comes through. And sometimes they stay constant, like certain familiars will, and sometimes they change out. But your soul animal, the difference is that that's the animal that represents your life force. So that's the constant. So if we go in and delve into past life work and future life
Mhm.
work, like we think about what's the constant between this life and the last life, it's the life force, the energy signature. So in my past life, theoretically speaking, I would have been a red fox, and in my future life I'm going to be a red fox. So that's the constant. The ship changes, the
Wow.
pilot moves from the ship to ship. That's my working theory to help people understand why when they go to see a past life regressionist, that's why that lifetime is affecting this lifetime, because in that lifetime your energy was encountering whatever it was encountering through those lessons that animal
Wow.
brings to the table. And then
Wow.
that's the differentiation. So that's where I say, okay, it's the same tree, different branch. And that's
Yeah.
how our soul animals can be guide animals for other people, but our soul animal is us. It's the baseline read.
So that's fucking fascinating. Um, and
Thank
and
you.
I would guess that people, and I, not to go on that tangent because I have a question. But I would guess that people might use this term soul animal. They might mix that up with totem animal, meaning like
Yes.
that's the spirit, or spirit animal, meaning the one in which you were born with that comes with you, right?
Yes.
Okay, so just for my own brain and go, okay, that's what we're talking
Yeah.
about. But I definitely like soul animal better because it speaks so much more to what it truly is. So my
Yeah.
question is this: is you said your familiar may show up in a physical form to
Mhm.
help basically be your companion, right?
Yes.
For a period of time, for however
Yes.
long they are here. And most witches are like, oh, my cat is my familiar, and that makes sense. And I've had conversations with other people about cats as their familiars, and and saying, well, how can you tell? And going, yeah, well, I know that Luna, my calico, that she was my familiar. Like she would do magic work with me. When I got that book
Yes.
deal for my first book, she had just been diagnosed with cancer. And I was like, listen, girl, I can't do this without you. So
Mhm.
you better hold the hell out. And I'll be damned, she passed like 2 days after I sent my manuscript in. Like
Oh, wow.
she was with me until the
Yep.
end. But my question is, if we have a soul animal
Mhm.
and then we have a familiar or some kind of a guide that shows up,
Mhm.
can these two energies be predator and prey? Can
Yes,
they
they
be at
can.
odds with each other? Like, can one be a fish and one be a cat? Like,
Yeah,
one be a bear and one be something a bear would eat, which I can't, a salmon? Like,
a
what is,
salmon, yeah.
right?
I mean, yes, I think
And how
so.
would that work?
Okay, so this ties in. I actually had a session this morning, and I was explaining to a harpy eagle about like how harpy eagles go and they hunt sloths, right? And so she was asking, she was like, "So could I never get along with a person who carries a sloth energy, or will I have an issue with that?" And the reason why she asked this was because I have another person that I read years ago who she's actually a Four Winds South American shaman who came to my workshop, and um, she's a sloth energy. She's a three-toed sloth. And she said, what hunts them? I said, the harpy eagle. And she goes, wait a second, is that big gray bird with like the feathers on top? I said, yeah. She goes, when I went, she said years before she even found out any of this, right? She went to the San Diego Zoo and she said, there's only ever been one animal who she felt so uncomfortable and not at ease, and it was when she went to go look at the harpy eagle there, and she said like she just got this sick feeling and she had to leave the space. And to
Wow.
this day, like she just has this like aversion to it. And so I had told this harpy eagle soul about this today, and she's like, so I wouldn't get along with that woman? I said, no, I think you can, because she may be in a different space. Because here's the thing, predator prey, it's about balance. And in nature, a predator is not going to be able to catch a healthy prey. Like they're just not, because that's the whole point. The predator is going to go after the weak links, the pests, the things that are threatening the ecosystem and the future of that ecosystem, right? So as long as a person is aligned and living in a space of like authenticity, right? Then if they're
Wow.
standing right next to their predator, they're going to be okay. If the predator is satiated and living in a space of like, I go and I do what I need to do in my spaces, they don't need to eat. It's like when you see a lion and a zebra drinking side by
Wow.
side, right? You can share that
Wow.
space, but it has to do with how balanced and healthy your energetic ecosystem is. So when people are drawn to their prey or their predator, usually there's an indication of something that they need, and they might become lessons to one another instead of actually blessings, right? But that's the dynamic that I
Whoa.
help people with, and that's, yeah, that's it's really
Whoa.
interesting. But yeah,
Whoa. That is, wow. That's, I mean, I have no words for that. Like, it just makes so much sense. And, I mean, even within witchcraft, within paganism, within spirituality, awesome, but also like in psychology and
yes.
energy work and all these things, and trying to figure out why people act the way they do, why they
Hmm.
act one way with one person and one way with another person. And there's
Absolutely.
so many reasons. This absolutely could be, and more than likely is, that one of those contributing factors, right? We
Yes.
talk about like, oh, Tauruses don't get along with this one and blah, but we don't really break that down into
Avenues. Yeah.
these other energy fields, and we have them. We have these other
Yes.
energy fields, right? That just blew my fucking mind wide open. Holy shit. Okay, we have to take a break to hear from our amazing sponsors. And
Absolutely.
when we get back from the break, I want to talk about your travels abroad, and what you're working on right now, because you're putting together some really cool stuff. So we'll take a break. We'll hear from our amazing sponsors, and we'll be right back. We are back with the amazing Fox, and we're talking about soul animals. And she's blowing my mind with the whole predator prey. So, like, like, what did you say?
The energetic
Your
ecosystem.
energetic ecosystem. I
Mhm.
like need to have that like tattooed on my forehead, like check your energetic ecosystem, because it's
Yes.
so true. Everything in balance, right? And who teaches us that better than animals, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
we're talking about ecosystems and we're talking about nature and balance. And one of the things that is really prominent in your life is travel. You travel a
Yes.
lot.
A lot
Uh,
more lately.
a lot more late. Well, obviously, nobody traveled
Yes.
anywhere during COVID, but you've been to Egypt recently, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, that's just fucking ginormous.
It
Um,
was.
right? I mean, that's a life-changing trip.
Yes.
So I'm curious about how your travels inform your spiritual work, because
Oh man.
the geography and
Yeah.
topography and ecosystem and earth and air and water is so different on so many different parts of the planet, and evolution in different parts of the planet with different forms of animals.
Hmm.
How does that inform your spiritual practice as a soul animal shaman? And then I have a follow-up question to that. So
Okay.
yeah.
Well, so a little backstory for those who are listening. I am what's called a third culture kid. So I was born and raised overseas because my father worked for the US government. And so I moved around a lot. At 6 weeks of age, we left Australia, which is where I was born, and we started moving. And every 2 to 4 years, we moved to a new country. So travel's kind of not in my blood, but it definitely is in my programming, And so when I moved here to the East Coast in North Carolina, there was a long period of time where I didn't travel. And I think it was because of that that I got cabin fever and suddenly decided in 2019 that I needed, quote unquote, out. I needed to do something. I needed to go somewhere. And I didn't know where to go or what to
Yeah.
do. But my father's first post in the Foreign Service years before I was born was Iceland. And I grew up with a lot of stories from there. And my father, I think, is a big part of my more metaphysical spiritual practice now, because he had all these books on aliens and ghosts, and he always watched like programs on things like that. And we would get those special edition National Geographic books that
Yeah.
would have like different things like that. And he read me stories about trolls and giants. And I asked him when I was a little girl, I was like, do you believe in unicorns? He's like, well, what do you believe? And I said, I believe in unicorns. He goes, then unicorns are real. Like that was his answer. Like he was very like, and I was like, okay, cool. Like for me, it was never a matter of not believing or believing. It was just kind of like, that's how it is. So when it came time to like, quote unquote, get out, I was like, I
Hmm.
think Iceland is the place for me. And it just made sense. So, of course, COVID hit in 2020. So my immediate plans to leave didn't happen then. But in 2021, I did go for 10 days. And that I think is a big turning point in my spiritual practice, in my sense of self and what I want for myself moving forward. I think
Mm.
that everything building up to that, the art, the ability to do the things that I do with my soul animal work, all of that kind of came to a point. And when I was sitting there, first of all, for anybody who's ever been to Iceland, for anybody who hasn't, you will know when you go. It's a surreal place. Every bit of magic that you could feel from the earth, I feel like I could feel there. And I knew the place. Like when we got there and I got my
Wow.
camper van and I got in, I just took off. Like I was like, I'm going to the grocery store. I like knew where I was going. And my two other
Wow.
groups of friends, they came along too. So there was three camper vans and they just followed me through Iceland because they were like, well, she seems to know where she's going. I'm
Oh
like,
my
here we go.
God.
So if there's such a thing as a soul country, maybe Iceland would that be that for me. But it definitely
Maybe.
changed things. The following year, so last year, I went for 21 days on my own. And that was really whew. And to be able
Wow.
to be out in what feels like the middle of nowhere by yourself is both terrifying and deeply awakening
Liberating.
and
Liberating,
liberating and
right?
awakening. And like there were moments. So the Arctic Henge, which is in a town called Reverhop, which is on the it's the most northerly town in Iceland, it's a modern ode to pagan ways, and it does hold a lot of magic. And it's on a hilltop called Fox Hill.
No way.
Yeah. And so, like, when I got up there this past time, I stayed at the campground. And what I would do every night is I would set my alarm for around 11:30. When I felt like there would be northern lights, I would set my alarm. And when I would wake up, I'd look out the window for strange clouds. And if I saw strange clouds, I immediately pulled out my phone, set it to the right ISO and all of that, and I would take a picture. If I saw any green at all, I was out. I was out there bundled up and I was ready. So I went
Amazing.
up to the hill and was up there for a little while with one other photographer, and then they left and I was there by myself. And then the northern lights came through, and I'll tell you, it is the most like just tears and just this feeling of like being with the ancestors, with the spirits. But then after a short while, not a short while, I was up there quite a while, but after a little while, like I was up there and I was by myself, the space started to change and I felt like it belonged to somebody else. And I had finally met like the end of my night while like I was up there, but it didn't feel like oppressive in a
No.
negative way. It was just
Yeah.
kind of like there are others here and it's
Mhm.
their turn. So I just gently like walked down off of the hill and went back to my camper van. I was like, okay, we're done. But like
Wow.
you can feel the earth there. You can feel the spirits. When they say the Icelandic people believe in elves, you can see and feel why. And
Mhm.
it's indescribable. Then comes my trip to Egypt, which that is also a whole other level of energy. One, the ancient Egyptians and animals obviously go hand in hand. Their gods have animal heads.
Yeah.
And the place where I felt the most zany energy was probably Sobek's temple in Komombo. So Sobek is the crocodile-headed god, and that temple he shares with Horus. And so Hathor is both of their wife. Like so, Sobek is married to Hathor, and Horus is married to Hathor. She's the cattle horned goddess. She doesn't have a cow shaped head, but she has the horns above her. And in that temple, you kind of see like a juxtaposition of the two, but they have mummified crocodiles, like huge ones, in the museum portion of that temple. These
Whoa.
temples blow my mind. But that specific day, we started up in Edfu and we went to the Temple of Horus there. When I got there, I immediately was like overcome with this feeling like I didn't bring anything. And there were hundreds of people. Let me tell you, if you're thinking you're going to go to one of these temples and be like, there's not going to be anybody, no,
No, it's
it's not
crazy. Yeah,
possible.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
insane. But like, you're walking through like sardines, like walking
Right.
through the space. But when I got in there, I felt like I didn't bring anything. And I felt so like unprepared for the energy that I felt in there. And what's cool about the Temple of Horus is that on the right side of the temple, there's a stairway that goes in a spiral, and it's a very shallow spiral. And as you like ascend, it's meant to mimic the way that falcons like catch a heat draft and slowly
Oh,
go up to the height. And if you were to walk across the top and come down to the other side of the temple, it's a straight shot at the angle that falcons use to attack their prey. So they built it specifically like
that's
that.
insane.
Right? It's so cool. So I walked the spiral up. Unfortunately, because of the safety and the integrity of the building, you can't walk across. So I came back down again, and then I walked up that stairway. And then came back down it, and it's such an interesting feeling. Well, after I did that, I was like, I want to go to the back of the temple, and I did, and there was a big group coming out of a room, but then there was nobody in that room. And
Mm.
as I walked over the threshold, and this is where it gets kind of like questionable about what you should do and what you shouldn't do, right? But as I walked
No
over
one
the
is judging
threshold,
you.
and if you are, I'm okay with that. But like as I walked through the doorway, I go, ow, and my thumb was bleeding. And something I had touched on my bag had like made me
Poked you?
bleed.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, what on earth? And now I'm standing in this empty room by myself.
Bleeding.
You best believe what I did with that blood. I put it
Yeah,
right on one of the stones in there. I was like, well, here you go. And then
yeah.
suddenly I felt this like calm. And I was like, okay, cool. Well, now comes the part with Komombo. So we get back on the Nile cruise boat. We go down to Komombo. We get off to go to the Temple of Sobek and Horus. As we're sitting there, as the sun is setting, a falcon flies right over us and is like hovering and then lands in the temple. And so we go in, and they have these two rocks to represent both sides. And I'll tell you, for those who are sensitive to energy, and
Yeah,
I am not as sensitive as some, but like I feel it as like little electrical things in my hands.
yeah.
When I put my hands on these stones, I was like, what is that? That's
Wow.
crazy.
Well,
And then we saw,
it's thousands and thousands of years
yes,
of
and it
energy and
blows my
intention
mind.
and
Oh,
spirituality and practice, and then all the people that are coming there to
yes.
also participate in the meanings of these spaces and
Oh,
the
and the
wonder of
Nile,
this unreal.
everything about Egypt is just like it's a whole other game, because you can feel it. You can feel the intention of the people, the ancient people. You can feel how the Nile affected them, like even just standing in the Nile, because you better believe I got in it. I was like, I'm standing in it.
Did you bring some Nile water back with you?
No, I did not. I did not. I didn't feel called to. There was a lot of things I thought I would bring back with
Hmm.
me, but that is one that I didn't. didn't feel called to.
Did you bring
Um,
sand back with you?
I brought some stones that I found. I
Stones.
found it's a really beautiful calcite that was at Hatshepsut's funerary temple, which was really cool. It's this, I don't even know, where did I put it? It's somewhere here in my space, but it's this beautiful, almost golden calcite that would have
Wow.
been one of the elements to alabaster. Alabaster is the stone that they built a lot
Yep.
with, and it
Yep.
was because it captured the light, and the
Yeah.
calcite is what captures the light in alabaster. So I found this like natural piece just sitting in the sand, and I was like, all right, you're coming home with me.
So how do these amazing travels, and you're going to continue
Yeah.
to travel, right?
Yes.
How does your travel, again, as a child growing up in all these different places,
Yeah.
seeing different ecosystems, seeing different animals, and now the ones that you're having as an adult, where your brain is now really functioning and going soul animal and
There's
and the
something to
practice.
this. Yeah.
Right, right. How do these travels and the different parts of the world and the different animals that are found there inform your practice?
Well, gosh, to put it simply, I believe that it helps me understand better the people that I'm working with because I have been where their souls match, if you will, right? So like
Right, because
to
somebody
talk to somebody, yeah,
from Nebraska could be a soul animal that's an animal that's found in Egypt, and
yes,
you can
yes,
now inform on that and not have a vague idea of that animal and
yes,
where it came from, but you can inform on that from an educated place.
yes. And one of the things I have been toying with, and I don't have it 100% formed just yet, is so we know that there's already spiritual tourism, right? Like there's ways that you can sign up. Like there's, if you look in England, there's plenty of like pagan retreats and things that you can go to have experiences in very sacred spaces, right?
Mhm.
And so it's not a new concept, but I've been really trying to figure out ways to connect people with these spaces during my travels, and help them better understand the physical ecosystems that their soul signatures match. Because I watched a video on YouTube, gosh, a while back, and one of the most beautiful things I saw was it was a travel video, very simple, but in the comments there was a woman who had said, "Thank you for showing these because I can't physically travel. My health will not allow for me to ever leave. I can't get on a plane. I can't be in a car." So to
Mm.
be able to watch people passionately going to these places gives me a sense that like I'm also being able to go to those places. And it really stuck with me because I was like, oh my gosh, like one, I don't know that I don't know what I would do if I couldn't go, but like two, I was blown away by the fact that this person is able to make those kinds of connections at a distance because of our
Mhm.
technologies that offer that. So
Right.
I've just been like really exploring what my options are to bring these things to people and learn because now I know what those temples are like in ancient, like from ancient Egypt, right?
Yeah.
I can convey that, I can share that. I'm
Yeah.
blessed in the fact that like I'm aligned to these things that allow me to bring back these stories. And I think that that's part of the nomadic shamanism that I talk about, like being able to take it because we are one world. People are always asking like, oh, can I use this rock with this rock? I'm like, yeah, we're floating on a planet with all these rocks. Like
Right.
so far we're
Exactly.
okay.
We're all of the earth and the earth is us. So, yeah,
Yes.
you know.
So, but like to bridge that and to connect that in a way that makes sense for people because I feel like too there's this whole idea that travel and experiences like this are just not accessible. So I've just been
Yeah.
really exploring that and trying to better understand through my experiences but also through talking to other travelers how to bridge those things, and the more people I connect with, the more I learn for
Mhm.
myself and then I can help others with that too. But
Sure.
it's really cool to be able to see some of these animals. And while I was in Egypt, we were coming back from the Nubian village and we were in this like little boat and we looked over to the bank and I was just filming the full moon because it was a full moon that night and like it was just sundown and there was a fox that ran along the bank, like parallel to our boat, and I lost it.
Of
I was
course you
like, what
did.
are the odds? What are the
Well,
odds?
isn't it funny because you say, what
You
are the
know?
odds? But the truth is,
But
we are the
then,
witches and this is what happens. And yet
yes,
we're still
blown away.
astounded by the magic and we're still astounded by the energy. And like, you're doing all
Yeah,
this deep spiritual work and your
yeah,
soul animal is like, hey, man, good job. And you're
yeah.
like, oh my
And you're
God,
like, oh my God, it's
no,
working.
because this
Yes,
is an affirmation that you
yes,
are where you're supposed to be. You're doing the work that you are supposed to do.
yes,
Okay, I have a question that's kind of out there, but I
yeah,
you brought it up, and so I want to ask: can mythical creatures be soul animals?
yes, yes. Yes, they can. And so can animals who are extinct. And so my
Oh,
reasoning behind that is, first of all, with on the form of creatures of legend, so they carry their energy too. So if I were to say unicorn versus horse, you can kind of differentiate like the tone of that animal. And I really feel that the reason why these animals hold such power is because they've held such power for such a long time that they have their own resonance. So yes, I do believe that creatures of legend can be soul animals. I've encountered people with them. Interestingly enough, there's a town about an hour from here, inland, and there's at least 3 dragons that live there. It's
because you're walking
like,
and you're like, oh, I can feel this shit.
yeah, so like
Yeah,
that was interesting to me. I'm like, but there's something that that town obviously needs with those people who carry
right.
that signature, right? So yes, that's one. And then creatures who are extinct animals who are extinct also have come through. So I've worked with people whose animals have recently become extinct, and I've worked with people whose animals have been extinct for a long time. um you're like, which
Have
ones
you
are
ever
they?
met a T-Rex?
I've met one dinosaur and it was an apatosaurus. That was an interesting situation for me because I didn't know what I was hearing. And the way that it came through in my visualization was it was the Badlands, where the dinosaur
Wow.
footprints are like,
Yeah.
in the stone. And I kept seeing that and I kept hearing this strange noise. And I was like, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. And I kept
Wow.
seeing these footprints and I was like, could this be a dinosaur? And when that happened, I got like bits and pieces of movement and breathing. And I looked at her and then I remembered when I was little, my dad took me to this museum and they had an apatosaurus skeleton. And I was like, that's you. So the question I asked her before I told her what she was, I'm going to ask a question. It sounds really macabre and dark, but like, bear with me. I said, do you feel like you should be here? And she looked at me and she goes, no, every day I wake up, I know I'm not supposed to be.
Oh my
And
God.
I said, are you okay? She goes, yeah, I'm okay. It's just bizarre. And I was like, can I ask you, have you met anybody like yourself yet? And she goes, I haven't. She's like, it's really hard for me to find me. She's like, I have friends who are always like, oh yeah, this person's just like me. And this, she goes, I feel like I'm genuinely alone. And she's like, I know I'm not alone. Like I have friends, I have connections, but I don't get it when people say I've met my person.
What are you doing right now? Because in your bio, you talked about how you're compiling information for a maybe book.
Yes, that is something that has been a long time coming. And actually, the universe, in true universe fashion, is giving me the boot in certain places in my life right now. So I'm actually in the midst of becoming truly nomadic for a little bit. The home that I'm in, long story short, is no longer available to me because they want to sell it. And so I'm taking this as a sign from the
Yes,
universe to kind of just be on the road a little bit to gather more information. And one of the things that I want to do whilst I'm on the road is really make a dent in getting this book written. And the book, the whole premise behind it is interpersonal relationships utilizing my modality of like work. So
brilliant.
yeah,
Brilliant.
the working
It's
title is Don't Date Your Food, but we'll see where that goes.
it's brilliant because again, it's a deep dive into things that I don't think in our community, in the witchcraft and the pagan community, I don't think we have anything that's such, like you said in the beginning of this interview, we have a handful of really great animal guidebooks, but they don't go into this in depth, walking through your life, understanding these the way you communicate, your personality traits, what this means to this life and whatever the next life is. So I
Yeah.
think that's freaking brilliant. Fox, where can people find you online if they want to book a reading, if they want to learn more about you or follow you on your travels?
Oh, Instagram is the best place to follow me because it's a visual platform. So where you're going to find me is at the Fox Lantern. And then, yeah, there's a booking button on my bio. There, you can always direct message me, and I'd be happy to talk to you or answer any questions you have about soul animal work, shamanism, healing, whatever.
I might have to book a reading because now I need to know what I am.
You know what you are. We talked about it a long time ago. I just don't think you remember.
Well, I have an idea of what I think I was,
No,
but
you've been this. You've been this.
I think I'm a rabbit. I've
You're
always
you're yep, you're a checkered giant.
a checkered giant. I
Yes.
know I'm big. I've put on a little
No, that's
uh
not what that's about. That's not what
I'm
that's about.
gonna look up checkered
People
giant.
people starve themselves eating rabbits because there's no fat on them. So you can't
Oh,
say
hey. Hey.
that.
She got long legs. She hear everything.
Yes. Yes.
You
No,
know?
no, and that's about abundance. So it doesn't surprise me that you are where you are, you know? It was only a matter of aligning to it. Once you did, everything came together.
And look, you and I get along just fine.
Yeah.
You're the predator and I'm the prey,
Yeah.
and I adore you.
I adore you too. And that's an indication of like where we're at too, you know? It's because I think that if we were who we were maybe 25 years ago, 30 years ago, if you and I met in like a high school situation, we probably wouldn't have gotten along because there would have been a lot of competition,
Mm.
you know? But I think that as we grow into our own sense of self, our own authenticity, you know, it I think that that evolves and we can recognize in each other solid foundational animals within an ecosystem, you know?
Unbelievable. Fox, you're amazing. I am so grateful you decided to say yes to my invitation to be here.
Yes, I'm so grateful you invited
Are you
me.
kidding? This is amazing. Okay, so we have to wrap up because
Yes,
we're over.
always with me.
I'm always over. Um, but so here's my last and final question. And
Yes.
I ask this to everyone who comes on the show. Okay. Uh if you could have me make you one magical meal, what would it be and why?
Oh, mm. Honestly,
Yes.
my question to you in response would be, "What's your favorite thing to cook?" And I would want that.
It depends
Whatever
on my
that is.
mood. It depends on my mood, right? Because I'm very seasonal. I cook whatever's in season and then I get on a kick where like I get really excited about one particular thing. So, like, is there something that comes to mind that you've only ever had once or like your favorite meal or like
Oh my
something
gosh.
like that?
You know
Cuz
you know what I would love to see your take on is a langoustine stew.
I don't even know what that is. Oh, langoustine,
Langoustine, yeah,
like
they're
the
like
they're like
they're like mini
shrimps.
lobsters.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
So
like a langoustine bisque.
yeah, kind of like that. Because in Iceland, there's a food truck by the Glacier Lagoon at Jökulsárlón that she makes some of the best langoustine stew I've ever had in my life. I went to one of their 5-star or their 4-star restaurants in
Wow.
Iceland, and I didn't like it as much as this little food truck is, but I love me like that. Oh my gosh, just talking about it is like, oh, that would be really good. But I'd love to see your take on it, or rather taste your take on it because yeah,
Like a bisque with
yes,
like a
and then we could have
creamy
the bread with your oils, like,
dunk,
oh
dunk, dunk.
god, yes,
Nom.
yes,
She making
yes.
me hungry.
Right?
That sounds amazing. You are just delightful. I'm so happy we got to do this.
Me
It's
too.
amazing to see your face. I'm just
Nice to you too.
so thrilled with everything that you're doing. And it's just been absolutely fascinating to watch your journey, to learn
Mhm.
about the work that you're doing. It's just incredible. Everyone, go follow at the Fox Lantern
That's correct.
on Instagram, follow her travels, Get a fucking reading because she's amazing. Thank you so much for being here. And until next time, everyone, I wish you so, so many blessings and much, much gratitude.